Good morning. Welcome to Newcastle United versus Arsenal reaction. Newcastle United have beaten Arsenal 1-0 at St James's Park yesterday. And it's a huge, huge result in the context of Newcastle's season, in the context of Eddie Howe's future and pressure and everything, building off the back of that win over Chelsea in the week. This is the reaction a day later than the game itself. Obviously, I was at Hull City yesterday on the latest leg of my new series, Exploring Football, where I go to different clubs, tell different stories, speak to different fans, and basically, go and just explain the insides of the inside stories on various different football clubs. That video is on the channel now. If you want to go and check it out, please do continue to subscribe. If you are in the chat, please drop something in the box so we can get going, but also like the stream as usual to help it grow and go further. Yeah, so while we wait for a few people to get involved, I'll just sort of run through what I thought of the performance. Again, obviously, I sort of half watched it live. It was in the press room while I was sat eating my lunch at Hull, but I didn't manage to watch it in great detail. Watch the highlights, watch match of the day back. The goal, first of all, I mean, I put a poll on Twitter, by the way, of which goal's better, asking for Rondon against Bournemouth in 2018 or yesterday's goal against Arsenal, Isak against Arsenal. Morning, Chris. Thanks for joining me. Which do you think is better if you're in the chat? Isak yesterday or Rondon against Bournemouth? For me, I think it's Isak's, just purely because I think someone pointed out actually in the response that Gordon's crossed his first time. And that Isak header, I love the idea that I love the fact that it's powerful enough and it goes past Raya without any problems. But it's sort of typical of Isak, where the power is there and it's got what it necessarily needs, but it isn't Rondon's goal like takes the net off. It doesn't do that. Isak's goal, it sort of nestles perfectly. It has the right amount of power on it, which I think is kind of like indicative of everything that Alexander Isak is as a striker. It's sort of just really it felt like a very typical Isak goal. I mean, he's not particularly known for being strong in the air, but it was really ideal goal from him. Real perfect example of what I would imagine an Alexander Isak headed goal was. And also it's a real crucial contribution from Anthony Gordon on the right. And I think this is what I'm going to be talking about in my in-depth analysis video tomorrow. So I'll leave talking about Gordon so much today on the live, but I am going to touch on Gordon tomorrow in the analysis. But I thought generally he sort of looked a lot better on that right hand side than previously when Murphy's been there, or Almiron's been there, or even Harvey Barnes. So it was a real positive as well. Let me know what you thought of the team selection as well. I mean, like the fact that, obviously, looking back, it probably won't get as much scrutiny, but before the game, lots of people really frustrated that Sandro Tonali came out again. Which, if you listen back to Eddie Howe's press conference when he was talking about 3 games in 6 days and managing minutes, it kind of felt like, because of the way he's managed Tonali generally, that Tonali would be the one to come out. Sean Longstaff kept his place. Willock and Joe Linton down that left-hand side was kept in as well. The other big thing was Byrne obviously played, I think, against instead of Kelly. Do correct me if I'm wrong, because I actually didn't see the team, but I think that's the case. Again, I'm so out of the loop because I wasn't actually watching the game yesterday. So yeah, please I'll let you guys lead the live today over me, because obviously you probably watched it and have more actual insight and in-depth knowledge of what happened in real time. As I say, I've only really watched the highlights back. But yeah, really, really, really good performance. And suddenly the season looks a little bit better, doesn't it? I mean, the position in the league isn't great still, and there were some other surprising results. Bournemouth really shocking everybody with the Man City win, and they're sort of people maybe sleeping on them for a top half finish this season. Forest obviously in the top 4. Newcastle go there next week, and it's not going to be easy at all. So the position in the league isn't great, but crucially, they're 3 points behind Arsenal. And just touching on Arsenal, actually, if the reaction from them sort of feels a little bit, sort of reminds me of a lot of last season, because they're struggling with key injuries, particularly Martin Odegaard. And the what they're sort of saying is that Mikel Arteta hasn't reacted enough to change the way that they play without Odegaard. Everything's built around him, and if he's not there, they suffer. And obviously, you're always going to suffer when you haven't got a player like Martin Odegaard. But it kind of reminded me a lot of last season and the frustration of when Newcastle were struggling with injuries, and Eddie Howe was continuously playing the same, and even this season, even without the injuries, continuously playing the same system and trying to do the same things, without the key component that makes it tick. And yeah, I think Arsenal fans have, to be fair, that as opposed to last season when there was a lot of controversy about the referee and the goal, and as opposed to Manchester City earlier in the season, Brighton earlier in the season, Arsenal fans tend generally, from what I've seen, have sort of accepted that Newcastle deserved to win. They were the better team, and Arsenal's performance was just very, very below par. Whether they're out of the title race remains to be seen. Obviously, Man City losing yesterday sort of probably keeps them in just about. Liverpool, despite the fact that they've won again and come back in the top of the league, I still think there's lots of people will probably doubt them until they actually see it happen. Because maybe the squad depth is probably the three of them probably the weakest. Having said that, Arsenal, obviously, I just said, are struggling as well. But let's talk about Newcastle. Get in the chat with some thoughts if you are in it, and like the stream also if you haven't already. And also, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Lots of non-Newcastle United content coming up, but always. And I can guarantee you this, every game will be reacted to live. There'll be a couple of standalone deep dive videos on the channel every week as well, with a analysis to every game, and also a sort of deeper look at ahead of a game as well. Not a preview. I don't want to do previews anymore, but I do like to get a little bit deeper and talk a little bit more about Newcastle United. So you'll always have Newcastle videos on this channel, absolutely guaranteed. But yeah, I mean, as I say, Sean Longstaff, again, another really, really good performance. And Joe Linton and Joe Willock down that left-hand side are so good. They always have been. Is it a surprise that Newcastle look more like they did in 2022, 2023 in the last couple of games, when that connection has been there? Is that the key connection? Are we looking at Joe Linton becoming more of a left winger than a centre midfielder? I think I said that on the True Faith podcast. I think it's the beginning of the end of Joe Linton as a midfielder. I think it was a necessity at the time, obviously going back to that Norwich game 2 or 3 years ago now, and how he became this really key player. But for me, Joe Linton has really shone in specific ways what he brings. I think you can do that, and he can do that in very many positions. He's physical, he's powerful, he drives the team on, but he also wins the ball high, presses really well, works really hard. Those are sort of components that you can put on the left-hand side and it'll work, and you can put in midfield and it'll work. You can put up front. The issue is that when he was up front and playing up front for Newcastle under Steve Bruce, is he didn't have that much movement. He ran around a little bit, but he was so isolated it was never going to work. But in this system, I think you can kind of put him anywhere in the midfield or left-hand side, and it'll work. My issue with him playing in midfield is it takes away from something. You miss something else. And with Gordon playing so well on the right in the last couple of games, I think there's a way to open the club up, the team up, to find a way of putting Willock or Longstaff or Tonali alongside Bruno. Three of those four on the left, Gordon on the right. I think that was a really, really good way of going forward. And again, I don't want to, the one thing I will say, and I'll say it again tomorrow on the video when I really go in deep on this, but when Anthony Gordon was signed from Everton, he was seen as really, really versatile. As I say, I've spoken to the different people who've worked with Anthony Gordon at various different levels with England, under 21s and in the youth ranks there, and also when he was in an academy at Everton. And everybody sort of said to me that he was always seen as somebody who could play on the right-hand side, down the middle, anywhere in those front four positions, the 10, the 9, the two wingers. It's only really at Newcastle that he's become seen as this sort of guaranteed left winger. And I think that's the way forward for me. But how did you view the performance? What did you think of the way that Newcastle attacked the game? It looked like they pressed well. They're really good at. It's almost like they're going back to basics again in the last couple of games, where they've sort of gone away from possession, because obviously they've played Chelsea and Arsenal, who are both very sort of got a lot of technical players and look to dominate the ball in so many ways. So they sort of stepped away from that and moved on to hitting on the counter attack and pressing high and counter pressing and working really hard, and it worked. And as I say, the midfield again looked tight knit again, because Sean Longstaff was in there. Got a lot of credit for his performance again. And I don't want to. I've seen lots of people sort of fall into two different camps with Sean Longstaff. You either really, really dislike him, or you see what he does and sort of give him a bit of credit. And it feels like whoever is feels like they're proven right after any given game. If he's had a tough game, the Longstaff the Longstaff haters, if you want, or the Longstaff dislikers, come out and sort of say, we told you so. And then if he has a great game like yesterday, the people who support him, and I would put myself in that category, as I said on these lives and these videos before. I see what he brings. I think that it's not necessarily what he does on the ball, it's what he does to the other players around him, what he does to the team generally. The team always looks more compact, more difficult to beat, more secure when he's in the team. So it's the stuff that you don't see, which is a real cliche. So I would put myself in that category, but I'm not sitting here and saying that, I told you so, because I also understand that the team does kind of have to progress past that sooner rather than later, and they need to find a different way, because they've got if it's Longstaff or Tonali, long term it has to be Tonali. So Newcastle have to find a way to make Tonali and Bruno work, and Tonali and whoever the third player is, because one day, because if Newcastle really, I think everybody knows, if Newcastle really want to get to where they want to get to, people like Longstaff, there is a sell-by date there. So I'm not going to say to the people who dislike Longstaff that you're wrong, because I understand why there's a criticism of Longstaff. My thing, though, is that he deserves a lot of credit for what he does, and what he does is have that impact on the team. He's done it once again yesterday, and Eddie Howe, tactics were right, team selection in the end was right, even though Tonali wasn't in the team, because I'm assuming he thought that it was more important to have Willock and Joelinton on that left-hand side, because that is really where it feels like that's where the characterization of this energy, and as I said in one of the recent videos, nobody makes Newcastle go out of change gear like Willock, and there was a lovely little run in the second half from Willock where he broke the lines really well, and it felt like this was a Newcastle team that was, as I said, going back to basics after the Chelsea game. Please do put some stuff in the comments, because I'd love to hear what you think as well. And also, as I say, like the stream if you haven't already. But Newcastle, I think they're up to, I'll just check on my phone now because I had the table up a second ago. Newcastle are, not up, I think they're maybe up to 9th, but Bournemouth's victory, Brighton's going close yesterday as well. Villa, Chelsea, both playing today. Spurs playing today. So and Brentford, I think, and Fulham tomorrow, and Manchester. So all the teams around Newcastle basically play today, off the back of some victories for teams yesterday, like Bournemouth. So the table probably doesn't reflect how important this result was, and if they didn't win, it would have looked a lot worse because that's how tight that sort of middle ground is at the moment. There's 3 points between Arsenal and fourth. Sorry, there's 6 points between Arsenal and fourth and Fulham in 12th. We're still at that stage of the season where it hasn't quite spread out fully yet. So a couple of victories will generally get you up the table. Obviously, it hasn't done for Newcastle because other teams have also won, and a lot of the teams do play today as well. But it was much needed as well. I think that was the other thing. I would have I said, like, going into the game, I think I wasn't quite fully on board when I saw the team selection, because I would have liked to. I always want to see Tonali play, but what do you do then? Like, this is the issue. If you're not going to play Tonali, you can't play Longstaff, and I think he was justified in playing Longstaff yesterday off the back of that Chelsea game. So it suddenly became Tonali or Willock, and as I've just said, Willock was the key to that left hand side, and Lewis Hall as well. I mean, he was interviewed on Match of the Day yesterday after keeping Bukayo Saka really quiet, and he really gave credit to Joelinton and Willock ahead of him, he said basically that they've done a lot of the sorry about that. They've done a lot of the hard work. They've done a lot of the hard lines for keeping Bukayo Saka quiet on that side, and it gave Newcastle a foothold, gave him an ability to play really well. Again, I think he, I've said for me in recent weeks that for much of this season, Burn has been my player of the season. Actually, I think growing into it is Lewis Hall. I think won October's Player of the Month and fully deserved it. And yeah, a really, really good performance. Please, as I say, do put some stuff in the. I'm just talking to myself, so I'd love some thoughts in the chat if you are, if you have any. What did you think of the game? And does it change your opinion of the season going forward? I mean, what do you think of the whole season now as a whole? I mean, Newcastle have had poor performances. They've had good results. They've had decent performances and poor results. I think that was probably the first time in the league they've won a game and fully deserved it. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but off the back of the cup game, that was it. So it feels like a corner might be turned, but also they go to a really, really tough place in Forest next week. And, that's the sort of place, even though Newcastle have done really well at Forest since they came back into the Premier League, it does sort of feel like that's a really, really crucial game for it could be a really difficult game, and that, Newcastle have to be on their guard for that game. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the game as well. And also as I say, I don't want to talk too much about Gordon on the right. Isak looks back to his best suddenly. Three goals in 3 games. Lots of people were criticising him and saying that he was poor against Brighton when he wasn't obviously match fit. He looks to have got his sharpness back and confidence back, and that as I said, I put a poll on Twitter, which I think last time I checked about 400 people had voted on, and it was about 70% that voted in favour of Isak's goal over Rondon's goal against Bournemouth in 2018. I think the Isak goal, as I said earlier, is more aesthetically pleasing because it's a first time ball from Anthony Gordon and a lovely cushioned header that has the right amount of power. And that just seems to typify, as I said earlier, that what Isak can do. He just seems to always have enough power on the ball without ever looking like he's hitting it or heading it too hard. Compared to Rondon's header, who when Rondon made that header, he almost took the net off. So it's a very different type of goal, even though the principle is the same. It's a very sort of like throwback goal in terms of cross and header, rarely seen these days. But excellent goal to as a pretext to a good performance. I think there's very little controversy about the game from what I've seen. Again, correct if I'm wrong because I didn't watch it live, but I really like that midfield makeup. I really like the fact that Willock and Joe Linton were back together, and again, yeah. What do you? For me, that at the moment, it could be that becomes obviously an away game at Forest is different when the makeup, the dynamics will be different. How Newcastle influence the game will be different, but for home games, does that trio in on the left in Hall, Joelinton, and Willock become undroppable for the foreseeable future if they can play? Do they play? I want to know your thoughts on that as well. But it really does feel like a turning point in the season. I think it's no coincidence that in the last two games, the pair of them have played alongside Lewis Hall, who's already been really, really good this season. And I think maybe it's great that we're breaking the idea that Gordon simply has to play on the left, purely because he was very good last season. But I think that's why he's sort of seen as the man who must always play on the left. But actually, it's very different in terms of what he can bring on the right hand side down the middle in a number 10 role. I don't like him as a number 9, as I've already said, but I think either side he brings something different. The good thing I think that he did yesterday was, and actually if you looked at the build up to the goal, he was hugging the touchline, and that stretched out Arsenal's defence, allowed more space in the box for Isak to head ball in, and I think I think that's a better way of. I quite like the idea of having one cutting in and one on the outside to sort of you have one. You have the best of both worlds. You have more space to attack for either whether it be Bruno to run into, and if he's playing in that sort of more start again for Bruno to attack if he's playing the more advanced 8 role for Trippier or Livramento to go inside. That can possibly happen as well. I just think there's more flexibility if you try and actually stretch the pitch in higher areas rather than cutting inside inverted wingers with the width coming from the fullbacks. It offers something different, and if you can have both the best of both worlds with Hall going and overlapping. Well, you can actually you've got an overload of 3 on the left-hand side at times because you've got Hall, Willock and Joelinton all sort of creating space and creating chances from that left-hand side. Maybe you go for something slightly different on the other side because you've got Gordon stretching it out and hugging the touchline, which creates a bit more space in that sort of central area, which the Arsenal defence had to cover. This is what happened with the goal. The Arsenal defence had to come out and cover it, which allowed space for Isak to head the ball in, and also the fact that he crossed the ball first time. Arsenal couldn't set, and it was just a phenomenal cross and a phenomenal header. But it came from a real. And I'll touch more on this yet tomorrow. But it came from something really, really important tactically. As I say, if no one's got anything to say in the chat, I might wrap this up in a bit. But please do get involved because I'm just talking to myself, and it's great to be able to talk about this, but I'd love to have you guys getting involved as well. If you have any thoughts, please do put some thoughts into the chat for me to react to, for me to get involved. Yeah. But as I say, I'm going to check on the progress of this poll that I put out on Twitter earlier as well. 447 votes all told since what time? Since about 9 o'clock this morning. 26% have gone for Rondon. 74% have gone for Isak. As I say, different types of goals, but the same principle. Great ball, great header, and sort of a throwback. And I think that was, I don't know if anyone saw Alan Shearer's reaction on the Premier League on the Premier League channel with Ian Wright when he was in the green room and he screamed and said that the goal was from the 90s. It must have been that sort of cross must have been an absolute dream for him. Shay Given on Football Focus breaking the set as well because he kicked out in celebration. So lots of really positive reactions to what was as I say, a fantastic goal and a really, really good overall performance. As I say, I like the idea of Gordon on that right hand side. I like the midfield makeup. Tonali it was harsh not to play him, but again, I think Eddie Howe has probably looked at it and thought it needs to be a bit more compact in the midfield, and Tonali is yet to. That's one thing Tonali is yet to show that whenever the three of them play. I know Joelinton wasn't in the midfield, but whenever those three play, there's a lack of compactness and there's too much space in the midfield. So I think Eddie Howe will come into this game and thought, well, let's keep it tight with Longstaff, and then also have that trio outside on the left as well in the thing. So yeah, I think that overall it was a really good performance, and yeah, Newcastle are 3 points behind Arsenal. It feels like there's a bit of a reinvigoration, especially if they can get a third win in a row in all competitions against Forest next week, which would be a really tall order because obviously they're in the race for the top four, and at the moment it looks like, and how long they can carry that on remains to be seen. But their defence is really, really strong. I really have been quite vocal about how much I think that Nikola Milenkovic has been one of the best signings of the summer for them, alongside Murillo. Obviously, Chris Wood is having the season of his life. I think it's 8 goals in 8 games now. And then they've got a lot of quality, like Hudson-Odoi, I think, scored yesterday. So that's going to be a really tough game. But off the back of this game and what they did well, it was compact. It was they surrendered the possession. They went for Arsenal, set traps. It was another performance back to basics, and that is where this squad. And if Eddie Howe wants to change things, I've said previously, if Eddie Howe wants to progress things, he needs to sort of make more, or the club needs to make sort of more considered decisions in the transfer market and in recruitment, because this squad doesn't look like it's ready for that at this stage, I think. But yeah, I think that's all I've got to say at the moment. If you don't have if no one's got any thoughts to put in the chat, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks so much for joining me. Like, share, and subscribe, as I said, for more videos, more non-Newcastle United videos. Please do go and check out that Hull City video as well, the little mini documentary I did from the KCOM Stadium yesterday. Really enjoyed it. And I'll be back tomorrow with a reaction and analysis video on this game, and also another video during the week as well. Thanks very much for joining me. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.